All right, so in this first half of chapter 20, we're going to be looking at the components of the urinary system. Here, this picture is the glomerulus, and this is the tangle of capillaries where we have plasma that is going to be filtered and urine formation begins. All right, so the urinary system helps to maintain homeostasis through the maintenance of bodily fluids. Part of homeostasis is maintaining the composition, the pH, and the volume of those fluids within those normal ranges or limits. The urinary system also gets rid of metabolic waste, excess chemicals, toxic substances like drugs, and then it also holds on to needed items. It consists of a pair of kidneys, a pair of ureters, and right here you can see here are the kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. The kidneys are a pair of reddish-brown organs. They are bean-shaped and they have a smooth surface. In the adult, we have about 12 centimeters long by 6 centimeters wide and about 3 centimeters thick. And there is a thick fibrous capsule that we call the tunica fibrosa. The kidneys are found on both sides of the vertebral column of the posterior wall of the abdominal cavity. The left kidney, as you can see here, is about 1 to 2 centimeters higher than the right because the liver is taking up room on the right side. Kidneys are what we call retroperitoneally aligned, which means they are behind the parietal peritoneum. Here we can see that the lateral surface is convex, and deep medially we have a concave nature to the kidney here. It's got a hollow chamber called the renal sinus here, and that is located in the renal pelvis. So the renal pelvis is the chamber and the sinus is the hollow area in that. You can also see that we have what we call major calyx and minor calyx. So as this divides off, let me try purple here, you can see that would be the major calyx or calyces, and the little smaller ones, when they divide off and get smaller, those are the minor calyces. You can see here, this portion, we have the renal medulla, and then we have the renal cortex above that, which is a bit granular, and then we have the renal capsule, which surrounds the outside of the kidney. The renal medulla is composed of what we call renal pyramids, and that's one of these little sections, these little slices here. And the renal pyramids to me look like strands of an orange or grapefruit. People sometimes have a hard time distinguishing the difference between these, and so I thought it would be really good to point that out here as well as in lab. So in taking a closer look at the kidney, we want to look at the functional unit of the kidney. Who really does the work in the kidney? That's going to be the nephron, okay? And so the nephrons are going to be coming here. They start in the cortex and drop down into the medulla. And so this is a blown up portion here. You can see we've got portions of the nephrons here, and then we have some tubules that go down, all right? And so this individual portion here, this is a single nephron. You can see we have a renal corpuscle and a tubule, and then a portion of this is going to be in the medulla, from like say here down. That's not exact, but that's a good estimate. And then from here up will be in the cortex. We're also going to take a closer look at the blood vessels that are associated with the kidneys and the adrenal glands and see how they innervate the renal pelvis and the ureters and supply the kidneys. So the main function of the kidneys are to maintain the volume, pH, composition of our bodily fluids within a normal range. We want to remove excess chemicals, remove metabolic waste, including nitrogenous and sulfur-containing products, which we get from protein metabolism. They're going to help control the rate of red blood cell formation as well by secreting erythropoietin. Kidneys help regulate blood pressure by secreting renin, which is an important enzyme that is part of the renin aldosterone angiotensin pathway that regulates blood pressure. And they're also going to help absorb calcium ions by activating vitamin D. Renal arteries come in from the abdominal aorta and transport blood to the kidneys. They enter through the hilum and continue on branching out until they reach the nephrons, which is, remember, the functional unit. These guys carry 15 to 30% of the total cardiac output to the kidneys. So the renal artery enters through the hilum, and then it branches to the interlobar artery, and then the interlobar artery passes between the renal pyramids. We're going through all these steps here. We're going to branch to the arterial arteries, and then to the cortical, my little pin's not working, the cortical radiate arteries, and then to the afferent arteriole. And so that's going to lead to the nephrons. Venous blood is going to return through the cortical radiate or interlobar vein, arcuate interlobar, and then the renal veins, and then it is going to join the inferior vena cava. So a nephron, I've already said several times, is the functional unit, and that is going to consist of a renal corpuscle and a renal tubule. Here we can see those main branches of the renal artery and vein. These are going to branch to the arcuate arteries, the cortical radiate arteries, and then finally to the afferent arterioles, which are going to lead to the nephrons. This is a pretty cool picture here that shows some of the renal blood vessels. This doesn't even show all of the blood vessels associated with the nephron, but you can see that blood vessels here really innervate and go through the kidney here so that they can drop off and pick things up. So we got a good look here at a nephron. Each kidney contains about 1 million nephrons, our functional unit. Each nephron is going to have a renal corpuscle and a renal tubule. A renal corpuscle is going to have a glomerulus in it. You can see we have the glomerulus here, and the whole portion here is the renal corpuscle. So we're going to have a glomerulus, and that is basically a tangled cluster of capillaries, and the purpose of those capillaries is to filter. We also have a glomerular capsule, which can also be called Bowman's capsule. It's a sac-like structure enclosing it. We have the afferent arteriole, which is leading in, afferent arteriole here, which is leading in, and the efferent arteriole there, which is going to take things that are leaving the glomerulus. Filtration of the fluid from the glomerular capillaries is the first step in urine formation. So that's important. First step in urine formation. All right, so we have this series of tubules, and we have the renal tubule, which is going to lead away from Bowman's capsule. So we have the glomerulus and Bowman's capsule here, and then so here's the renal tubule leading away from that, and that forms what we call the proximal convoluted tubule. Convoluted just means folded, twisted, or coiled. So next then we're going to have the loop of Henle, and so this is the loop of Henle. This is going to have a descending limb and an ascending limb, and then that's going to return over here to the distal convoluted tubule. And so we have all these pathways, and these are very important components here that we're going to be looking at. So several tubules are going to come together and then join into this collecting duct here. They're going to dump all their stuff into the collecting duct, which is then going to go to the renal medulla, and other ducts are going to merge and empty into the renal medulla as well. The tube then empties through renal papillae and into the minor calyx. All right, here's a microscopic view of the kidney, and you can actually see here the glomerulus, and then you can see this white portion is the capsule, and you can see the renal tubules here. Pretty cool. Also, we have our collecting ducts and some blood vessels, and those are little red blood cells in there. These are light micrographs, so this is not exactly as close up as we're going to see it in an actual microscope that we have. So the top of each nephron's ascending limb is going to pass next to that afferent arteriole. At this area, we have cells that are specialized to form what we call the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Juxtaglomerular apparatus. This consists of the macula densa here, the macula densa, And these are tall, densely packed cells. And then we have the juxtaglomerular cells, which are large vascular cells that are made out of smooth muscle. The juxtaglomerular apparatus regulates the filtration rate by secreting renin, angiotensin II, and that is a portion that can do some vasoconstriction for both afferent and efferent arterioles, and has a lot to do with regulation of blood pressure. All right, so here we can see the juxtaglomerular apparatus. All right, and so the location of the apparatus is going to be right here, and then we're going to pull this out and look at this a little bit larger. We can see we have the juxtaglomerular cells and the macula densa, which come together and make that juxtaglomerular apparatus there. Of course, the rounded portion here is going to be the glomerulus. If you have glomerulonephritis, itis is going to be an inflammation. That is going to be inflammation of the glomerular capillaries. So here we can see the distribution of the nephrons here. We've got the cortical nephrons, which are of course found in the renal cortex, and they have a very short nephron loop here. All right, so they don't go down as far as the renal medulla. Now the juxtamedullary nephrons sit lower in the cortex, and so while these start up here, these are lower, and so they have the tubules up here, but then they descend down into the renal medulla. And while they only compose about 1/5 of the total of the nephron, they're very, very important to regulation of water balance. Here we can see the pathway of blood that's going through the blood vessels of the kidney and the nephron, and this is what we call a portal system. Some important points to pay attention to are things like the vasa recta and the paratubular capillaries, which are surrounding the loop of Henle there. The main purpose of a nephron and a collecting duct is to control the composition of body fluids, remove waste from the blood, and then we're going to produce urine. All right, so urine contains electrolytes, waste, and excess water. Urine formation begins with glomerular filtration. It's the force of blood pressure that is driving filtration there at the capillaries. Most of this is reabsorbed into the bloodstream, and a small amount is going to remain as interstitial fluid. Nephrons use two capillaries working together in a series, okay, and this is glomerular filtration. It makes about 180 liters of fluid, which is about 4 times the total water in the body, and it does that every 24 hours, okay, so it's really recycling. Tubular reabsorption then is going to reclaim things like water, electrolytes, and glucose, depending on what our body needs. If we have the opposite of that, we call that tubular, or we will have the opposite of that, we call it tubular secretion, and this moves things from the blood, from the paratubular capillaries to the renal tubule. So here at the top we have systemic capillaries. So compared to and at the bottom we have the renal tubule. So compared to most capillaries in systemic circulation, so glomerular filtration, formation of urine starts by filtering substances like ions, water, and dissolved molecules out of the glomerular capillaries into the glomerular capsule. Proteins are going to be too large to pass through, but water and small dissolved molecules, ions, these can filter through, okay? Glomerular capillaries are going to be more permeable than regular capillaries. So these guys are more permeable, okay? Because they have extra tiny openings that we call fenestrae. Fenestrae, let's see if I can write this on here for you. Fenestrae in their walls, and the filtrate is going to be composed of water, solutes, glucose, amino acids, urea, uric acid, creatinine, sodium, potassium, lots of other ions, and you can see those in table 21. So the filtration rate in the glomerulus is increased by both vasodilation of the afferent arteriole and vasoconstriction of the efferent arteriole. And then we also have what we call podocytes and pedicels that are part of the glomerular capsule. So here you can see the finished spray that is allowing filtrate to pass through, and below that you can see the podocytes. Concentrations of particular components of the blood plasma can be used to evaluate kidney function. For example, the kidneys are functioning, if they're functioning inadequately, the plasma concentrations of things like urea, which is a nitrogenous waste, indicate or can be indicated by a blood urea nitrogen, which is a BUN, B-U-N test. Okay, BUN test. Also, creatinine may increase as much as tenfold above normal.